Sup, Niners faithful. I'm Juju Talk Sports. That's Jose Corral. This is 49 Reasons. Listen, go ahead and hit that subscribe button on today's episode. So we broke out the Kyle Shanahan flat brims here because we're going to be talking about our head coach, our fearless leader, the person that has led this second wave of quality Niners football in our lifetimes. And we're more than happy about it, especially coming off those Harbaugh years. But, Kyle just got an extension. And we're happy about it. It means we got another potentially 6 years of Kyle Shanahan, similar to Mike Tomlin, Bill Belichick. If you look at all the good franchises around football, they always have a consistent head coach. I think that is the sign of a great organization. And basically, we're just going to kind of break down our coach, talk about what makes him good, what we feel as though he's leading, the sense of direction he's leading with this team. So, Jose, what do you think it is about Kyle that makes him such a great character in that locker room?
Honestly, I think the thing that makes him so respectable for football players in general, he just knows the game. The guy just knows the game. Obviously, he grew up through the game, with the game. He just knows X's and O's better than a lot of people do. And I think that gains a lot of respect in locker rooms, especially in a professional locker room like the NFL. I think whenever you can stand up there and say, hey, this is going to win us ball games, this isn't, this is going to work, this is not, you're better, your style of play is better this way than it's not. I think players just respect that in general. And whenever you have a coach like that understands you and understands how they could really develop your skills to a higher level, they're really going to respect you as a head coach. And even his assistants around him, he's a team first guy that just knows the X's and O's, that everyone in the building is just going to automatically just gravitate to him whenever they want to see, okay, what do we have to do this week in order to win? What do we have to do, in week 7, in week 9, and week 10, when things start getting a little bit, a little bit more difficult with injuries as we saw last season. That didn't slow him down at all. So I think whenever you bring in a guy like Kyle Shanahan to an organization like the Niners, it's not just the leadership aspect of it, which he has. Obviously, it certainly helps that he came from a football family, but he just knows the game so well that if he steps into the room, he'll know that game better than a lot of people, a lot of other head coaches. So I think players probably see that as a sigh of relief, saying, okay, we have a guy that we can rely on and a guy that's really going to put us in the best position to win. So I think that it really comes down to him just knowing the game better than a lot of people.
I want to give a quick shout out to the Denver Broncos organization for choosing to hire Vance Joseph rather than choosing to hire Kyle Shanahan, because it was a steal for the Niners when we managed to pull him down as our head coach in 2017 after Tom Sula, which is one of the most regrettable head coaching hires in NFL history, after Chip Kelly. And I was optimistic with Chip Kelly. Don't get me wrong. I was just a little bit hesitant on if you give him player control, because that's what really doomed him in Philadelphia. But Kyle was just that stabilizing force. And in 2017, even though we didn't necessarily get the results we wanted, obviously that was a 6-win team, and 5 of those wins came after we got Jimmy Garoppolo. You looked at how that team played, and the talent was horrible. It was not a great roster by any means, but early in the season, there was a stretch there where I swear they lost 5 straight games by 3 points or less, and they were all against quality opponents. And that's what made it kind of interesting when Jimmy comes along. He gets that quarterback to add to him, and then you start seeing some of those close games turn into wins. And you mentioned it. Knowing the game, I think, is huge when it comes to Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, he's been around football his entire life with his dad and being a coordinator out there in Houston, the Cleveland Browns, which a fun Cleveland Browns story is the reason he quit that job, and he actually created a PowerPoint presentation to quit that job because they wanted him to start Johnny Manziel at the time. So he left like a baller there. He had some good years in Washington, even though he hated it there. And, I think what separates him from the pack, and I think it's a great quality, and I think why he's more than deserving of this extension, and what I think elevates him in the coaching ranks as well, is there's a lot of good coaches that you probably rank ahead of him. Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh. But the fact that Kyle calls plays, I think, is a huge coup for the Niners. Because we don't have to worry about our offensive coordinator leaving. Our offensive coordinator is our head coach. yeah, we might lose Michael LaFleur. We might lose some run game coordinators, Katie Sowers, all these other people that are part of, that winning combination they have. But at the end of the day, Kyle Shanahan is the backbone of our offense. So as long as nothing happens, Kyle, we're doing just fine. So that's why I love Kyle. That's my little rant on Kyle. Jose, let me ask real quick. Where would you rank Kyle among all the NFL head coaches right now?
I think after the season that we just saw, the 2019 season, I'm not scared to put him in the top 10 conversation at all, to put him in the top 10 ranks. You listed off some coaches. What a lot of those coaches have is just the leadership aspect. Obviously, you have your Sean Paytons, you have your Mike Tomlins, your Bill Belichick's, of course, even Pete Carroll to an extent, where those guys are solidified, just top 5 guys that are going to be hard to knock off until they literally retire. But I think if you just look at it as a coaching standpoint, as a head coach, as a leader, and you mentioned it, play calling is huge in that aspect. I'm not scared at all to name him as a top 10 coach in this league. If you look at all the coaches, we see every year just a coaching carousel, and for him to be stable there in that situation, and I think that rank is just going to get higher if he continues to have the success that he had last year. I wouldn't be scared to put him in the top 5 if he has another good year like he did last year. Give him another 12 wins, 13 win season. Top 5. I mean, it's going to be hard for me to list five other head coaches that I would rather have in the league if he has another season.
Let's talk about who's ahead of him then, because obviously Bill Belichick going to be in a league of his own, and we'll see how this year goes without Brady. So huge year for him. Mm-hmm. Andy Reid just beat him in the Super Bowl. Hard to argue with the results. Andy's been doing it for like 20 years. So I'm sure Kyle will be doing this for 20 years too if he continues at this pace. But hopefully he doesn't have to wait as long for that Super Bowl, obviously. I would put Tomlin ahead of him. Now, I mentioned, like I said, Tomlin doesn't have the play calling in his back pocket. That's one of his biggest things that hurts him. But he's also never had a losing season out there in Pittsburgh for as long as he's been there. He's been with one of the blue blood franchises in the NFL and has held his own with a cast of different personalities in that locker room as well. So that's why I respect Mike Tomlin. I'm going to have him just ahead of Kyle. John Harbaugh, that's an interesting one. So, again, John Harbaugh doesn't necessarily play calling now. And he was knocking on getting fired or on the hot seat prior to Lamar taking over there. And you could give a lot of his success to, Greg Roman. The fact that they were so willing to adopt a new scheme, and we'll see how that translates over the next few years. But he does have the ring. He does have the Super Bowl ring as well that he can always pull on. I just think as an overall head coach, I'll maybe rank him ahead of Kyle just for now. But again, when I'm listing these guys, I think it's important to realize that they may rank over Kyle right now. But Kyle's ceiling is so far ahead of the pack, whether you factor in age, when we talk about Andy Reid and Bill Belichick, or when you factor in what he's able to do in the play calling aspect. Another tough argument that I know Niners fans have always had is Sean McVay versus Kyle. And here's the thing you could say about Sean. Their worst season right now, 9-7. Kyle, unfortunately, he does have those 2 years in San Francisco. It's like how much do we discount those first 2 years in Santa Clara from his resume? Because as awesome as the 13-3 Super Bowl season was, those 4-win seasons, that 6-win season, there was a 1-win season until Jimmy got there. They still exist. The team was playing hard and it was a bad roster, don't get me wrong. But when you put that against Sean McVay, who has a similar type resume, a Super Bowl loss, and then, again, a couple winning seasons, it's like, well, he does have that. But Kyle, technically, there's no Sean McVay if there's no Kyle because they run a similar type of offense. They work together very closely in Washington. I would also put maybe Pete ahead of him at the moment.
I would.
I mean, Pete, he'll make those bonehead calls. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
They'll all talk about 2014. But he does have a ring. He did go to back-to-back Super Bowls, and the Seahawks are always a threat regardless of year, how bad that roster is. Some of it you could give to Russell Wilson, but not all of it.
Right. No. Yeah. Those guys that you listed off, a lot of them were obviously, pretty obvious. I would throw in Sean Payton there as well because he's also another guy where he's been in the Super Bowl ring. He could always pull that out as well. But it's super interesting that you mentioned Sean McVay because if you look at young coaches around the league, you have Sean McVay and you have Kyle Shanahan. Those guys are really the premier guys that if you could look in the league 15 years from now, possibly 10 years from now, it seems like those two guys are still going to be at the top of their game as far as head coaching wise, especially Sean McVay because he's actually a little bit younger as well. But it's very interesting to compare those two guys. And I think for now, I give the edge to Sean McVay because of those two seasons you had kind of mentioned. Sean McVay, he got off to a hot start in Los Angeles. I'm not going to lie. I was very, very scared of those Rams. Still am scared of those Rams. I mean, if you keep that team healthy, and the way Sean McVay kind of could take over a game really with himself with Jared Goff as well too. I'm still scared of them, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see how long those two will last in their respective franchises. To see them battle it out year after year in the same division, it's going to be really, really neat to see. And maybe another, if we're talking about ranks. It's going to be hard to put him over Doug Peterson in this situation because of the ring,
winning coach,
because of the ring. And although he's kind of in a hot seat, I think it's going to a lot of it's going to depend on what he does this year. You look at a guy
I don't know
like
how you could put him in the hot seat. To be honest, they were still in a playoff game last year.
They were still in a playoff game. Yeah, they still won the division,
and they won a playoff win the previous year with Nick.
The previous year with Nick Foles, yeah.
You look at his resume. Yeah, you have multiple playoff wins in multiple seasons. You have a couple division crowns, a Super Bowl. So yeah. Doug Peterson does have that. I mean, Frank Reich was there, which you could give a little bit of credit. You could say John DeFilippo was there. So you had some offensive play callers that really helped Doug.
Right.
But Doug, being a former quarterback as well, I think does kind of he's not completely bereft of talent in like his own philosophy, what makes him a good head coach. Whereas there's some coaches, like I said, I love Tomlin, I love Harbaugh, but the fact that they don't play call or the fact that their actual playing experience is limited, I feel will always be a key thing. Now, if we're talking about today, you have to take Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan. I'm riding with Kyle. I think that's where I feel on that argument. Now, for Sean, what he needs to consider, or as a consideration to factor in with him, this is going to be a year in which the Rams have a less talented roster. When he first took over there after the Jeff Fisher years, you had Gurley running hard. You had a talented trio of wide receivers between Cooks, Woods, Kupp, Jared Goff. I still think there's questions. We could talk about or Jimmy versus Goff. I think Jimmy's a little better than Goff in my opinion.
A little bit better, yeah.
And then that defense now for the Rams has started to taking some slight hits. They added Jalen Ramsey, yes, but overall I think that defense has started to dwindle over the years. It just gets harder when you start paying people, in which the Niners are going to have to deal with in the same situation. I want to touch on that Sean Payton one you mentioned too, because we didn't really get into it. How fun of a game was it for last year for Kyle Shanahan to beat Sean Payton in that epic environment that was the Superdome?
Yep.
I think if you look at that game, and I actually was just watching the highlights from that game last night. It just showed up on my YouTube, right? Some of the play calling that Kyle had the balls to put out in that game. He had the throw by Emmanuel Sanders. He had that little
Raheem Mostert,
yeah. He had that little pitch thing from Kyle Juszczyk to Raheem Mostert as well.
Yep.
Quite a few end arounds. Jimmy on a deep bomb after they were down 2 scores. Like the balls that Kyle had in that moment to not look at Sean McVay or Sean Payton at home in the Superdome. He was like, okay, my offense has got this. I know my defense isn't really playing at its best today. Granted, we had to take out Jared Cook to do it, but still, we rolled in that game. Our offense was never a concern. Jimmy played the best game of his career. And I think one thing that we could also mention with Kyle is like, does Jimmy being there take away from his shine? No, it doesn't, because any good coach, I don't care who you are, you need the quarterback. Like,
Yep.
Bill Belichick, for as good
Bill
as
Belichick.
he is, without Brady, he was
We'll see.
an average coach. And if we go back to the Cleveland years, Drew Bledsoe, mild success, but this is now his time to figure things out. Sean Payton has always had Drew Brees. Sean McVay, like I said, was able to get the most out of Jared Goff, which decent, still a first overall pick,
First overall pick.
Carson Wentz, and Doug Peterson, that's, a blue chip player to have. Being to Doug's credit, being able to get the most out of Nick Foles in the playoff runs. Andy Reid, for as much success as Andy has had over his NFL career, and he's got a lot out of Alex Smith, Donovan McNabb, and others.
It still took Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
It still took Patrick Mahomes to get the ring, yeah.
Exactly. So that's why, and this is for another video, Jimmy is important to Kyle Shanahan's success as anything, because we just need someone that can run Kyle Shanahan's offense. Kyle Shanahan's good, and he's a top 10 head coach. He should be a top 5 in terms of ability. He's a top 5 head coach.
Yeah.
Just outside of that right now. Actually, I do want to play a clip before we close out this episode. So if you are a Niners fan, you know about the resident Niners hater, Mike Florio of NBC. He actually came out with a statement in regards to Kyle Shanahan's goals for the season, Super Bowl or bust. I want to play the clip to end the show. We could kind of talk about it a little bit on our way out here. So here's Mike Florio.
I have so much respect for Kyle Shanahan. He's one of the great coaches in football right now. He's potentially going to be remembered as one of the great coaches of all time if he keeps doing it for another 25 or 30 years. The worst thing you can do going into a season is set unrealistic expectations. And the worst message you can send to your locker room is, we want to fast forward to the point where it went off the rails for us last year. When you start thinking about that moment and getting back to that moment, I guarantee you're never going to get back to that moment, because everyone's gunning for you this year, Chris. Everyone's coming after you. You've got to dig out of 0-0 in a division that has the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Cardinals. Don't think about what you're going to do in Super Bowl 55 with 10 minutes left. Think about what you got to do week 1 out of the gates. You got to build the house brick by brick to even have a chance to play a playoff game, much less the Super Bowl. So,
anyway, I guess my point in playing that clip is just, according to Mike Florio, never shoot for the stars. Tell your kid they will never be president. Just, go ahead, settle for your medium 9-to-5 job. That's all you can expect in life. And the Niners, hey, we'll be happy if we get 8-8. Now, I'm glad that Kyle holds our team to a higher standard. It feels good to be one of the most recognized organizations in football again. And Niners haters, eat your heart out. This is our year. Anyway, guys, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Once again, Juju Talk Sports, Jose Corral. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace out, Niners faithful. Have a great rest of your day.